Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Squared Up V4 training webinar, where we're going to be talking about upgrading from Squared Up V3 to V4. My name is Matthew Long, and I'm joined today by man of the people and support testing systems lead, Adam Kinniburgh.
Hi there.
So we're going to get started straight away because we've got a jam-packed session. So very loose preamble. We're going to talk about upgrading from V3 to V4. We're going to talk about the three strategies you've got in terms of moving content across if you choose to do so. We're going to look at our upgrade assessment tool, which really gives you a good estimate of how much effort's going to be involved in actually doing this and lets you get ahead of the issues that may arise before you try and do the upgrade. And then we'll look at some common issues and some common resolutions that go along with that. So should be pretty informative for upgrades. If you're on the webinar with us, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will get to those at the Q&A at the end, or we'll do them as they come up throughout the webinar if they're sort of relevant to the discussion at that point. So please make use of that resource. We have our technical team. Me and Adam are watching the questions as well. So go nuts and feel free to use us as a resource. That's what you're here for. Okay, with that, let's get started. So first thing before upgrade, step 0. Before you start your upgrade journey, here are a couple of things you really should keep in mind from a non-technical perspective, but you should really sort of make sure they play into your upgrade plan. First thing is, we highly recommend that you are on the latest version of Squared Up V3 before you upgrade. And if not, you are on at least 3.3.5. The reason for this is that you have the highest feature parity from V3 to V4 at that stage. It's sort of the most tested internally migration path if you do that way. And also it's easier for you using the most recent features to move your V3 environment into a similar enough environment to V4. If you're back and all the way on 3.1 before we put loads of enhancements in the product that are still the same way they are in V4, that's all going to be new to you in addition to the V4 upgrade itself as well. So it's definitely worth making sure you get onto the most recent version of V3. If you're using OMS right now, I highly recommend you get yourself onto 3.4 or later. The reason being, in version 4, we've removed the OMS tile and we've migrated it fully to log analytics. So you are going to have to convert your OMS queries, your old sort of V1 style log analytics queries, to the KQL new style. And it's going to be much easier for you to do that in your V3 environment where you can have both, move it across and then migrate than it is to migrate that across and recreate afterwards. So that's my sort of first top tip there. So get yourself on the most recent version of Squared Up. Second thing is that once you upgrade your production license to V4, you have 90 days of side-by-side V3 support. So there is a step in the process where basically you say, right, I'm now using V4 in production. My license key is now V4 enabled, which you can do via a self-service portal. You don't have to contact us directly to get that done. But once you make that step happen, support will now treat you as if you are on V4. And for the next 90 days, you've got V3 support side by side. After that, your V3 production instance is no longer supported. And if you continue to use it in production, you're in violation of our licensing. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Don't run through that upgrade step and upgrade your license to V4 until you're actually ready to go live production. Don't do this just to play around with the thing and see what's new, but know that you're not going to upgrade for at least 4 months. Be aware that a number of features have been superseded in V4. The OMS tile has been replaced with log analytics. The reason we've done this is because in January 2019, Microsoft are going to fully remove the OMS portal from Azure. Along with that, presumably all the APIs. So you are not going to be able to use those tiles anyway. So rather than having a vestigial thing in the product that we weren't, you couldn't use and just like leading you astray, we've removed it from the product at this point now to kind of get ahead and preempt that change. Dynamic tables have been replaced with the matrix tile. This is a seamless part of the upgrade, so you shouldn't notice any loss of functionality. But if you find yourself at some point like copying and pasting a dashboard JSON like from community answers into V4, it doesn't work. That's probably the reason why it contains a dynamic table tile. You need to make that small change yourself. And we've replaced the profiles feature with a new feature called team folders. And there isn't a one-to-one parity there. And this is where some of these sort of upgrade issues come around. So if you don't have any profiles in V3, you're probably going to have a very simple upgrade process. If you've got a lot of profiles with lots of varying permissions and dashboards and everything else, it's quite complicated. That's probably indicated you're going to have a bit more work to upgrade. So just sort of be aware that is the case.
It's worth noting as well that we'll cover some of those new features in later episodes in this series.
Yes, exactly. And also we're going to cover them on the coffee breaks as well, but more about that a bit later. Okay, and the other thing that's important to note is that the V4 navigation bar has changed quite significantly from V3. Not necessarily in terms of the way it looks, it's still a nav bar on top of the screen, but in terms of what it will let you do with dashboards. So things like, for example, having the same dashboard appear twice on the nav bar, or renaming the nav bar item so it's got a different name than the dashboard. Things like that are gone from V4. V4 has a sort of simpler navbar where it basically emulates a folder structure, which means we can attach permissions to those sorts of things, hence the team folders bit. So that makes it easier to sort of reason about, and it means we can put other features on top. But again, might mean if you've got a very complex navbar, and it's not just like one navbar that everyone sees, you might, again, have some sort of issues there that you have to sort of train users around or accept some changes. And then the final one is if you've gone and configured loads of web API providers, be aware that you're probably going to have to recreate the providers, not the tiles and dashboards, but the providers in V4. The technical but simple answer for this is that unless you're running HA, by default, we escrowed the encryption keys used to store some sensitive information in Squared Up into IIS. So IIS fully manages it for you, which is great because it's very secure. The downside is that Upgrade and anything else outside of that website has no access to those keys. So by design, we can't have the Squared Up V4 installation access the encrypted V3 content because we don't have those keys, which is why you have to recreate them. The good news is that when you recreate the provider, any tiles that are configured to use a provider with the same name just continue to work. There's not actually a huge step there unless you've gone and got lots of people to put credentials into the product for you, in which case you're going to have to start getting those credentials back and getting those stakeholders to come and re-enter stuff. So just something to be aware about from a planning perspective there. Okay, now for those of you who are on V2, just a sort of a note here that there is no direct upgrade path between V2 and V4. Hopefully by now we should have sent an email out to all of you. We should have been contacted, I should say, sorry, sort of notifying you of this and sort of asking you to get in touch so that we can walk you through your different options, because there are migration paths, but they're a little bit more complex than something we could talk about on this webinar. So if you haven't had that email, if you haven't had someone reach out to you, maybe we're using an old stale address or one of your former colleagues, or you've got us on spam block, please reach out to our support team so they can walk you through your stuff, because if you also, in case you weren't aware, Squared Up V2 will end of life in August 2019. So you now have less than a year to either get to V3 or V4 from V2. Okay, so Ash is actually on the webinar. He's going to be handling V2 upgrades. He's actually on the webinar now, so if you are a V2 customer and you've got questions, immediately as this goes along, feel free to put those in the chat, and I'm sure he'll jump on and get in touch with you. Okay, so that's V2. V3, basically there's 3 supported options that we sort of have for V3 to V4 upgrades. Our sort of gold tier, like one that we recommend to almost everyone, is to do side-by-side. So this is no changes to V3. You can side-by-side V3 and V4 on the same server, installs V4 and clones the content and converts it into V4. It uses, if you're using HA, it uses exactly the same file share without impacting V3. So there's nothing else extra to configure there, which makes it pretty simple. The only thing it won't do is, bearing in mind, it's not going to continually sync your content. So once you've done this, the V4 install is a snapshot of V3 at the time that you made that installation. So people are still going and hitting V3 at this point and making changes. You're going to have to manually sync those into V4. So just keep that in mind. And we'll talk about that a bit more later on when we come to sort of a demo of this.
From a support point of view as well, just like to point out that this is absolutely should be considered as the only option unless there are really sort of really valid circumstances. It is the best option by a long way, like Matthew said. So yeah, if you do need to take one of the other options, then do it with a lot of consideration. Side-by-side is completely unobtrusive for your current V3 environment. You can do it over and over again if you want to until you get it right. So yeah, just keep in mind that this is by far the gold option for us.
So the next option is the new installation option, which is also actually really easy from a support perspective, because basically here what you're doing is saying, my V3, I don't want it anymore. I'm going to throw that away. We're going to make a brand new installation that's clean in V4, and we'll build up from the ground up. So this is great if you're maybe thinking our V3 environment was great, but it didn't have any process. There's dashboards everywhere. No one really knows who owns anything. It's a bit of a dumpster fire. Well, let's actually just start fresh. And you were mentioning a lot of people are looking at this as part of the SCOM upgrade, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. We hear very frequently that when people upgrade SCOM, they actually throw SCOM away for a number of reasons. Again, my monitoring is not working as well as I want it to, or what you just basically, we find more often than not when people are moving up, they will start from scratch, rehome all their agents, and sort of try to do it sort of better, I guess, next time.
Yep.
So again, SCOM 2019 coming out soon. So yeah, it might be a good opportunity to sort of take stock of the whole environment and sort of start from scratch. And again, that's a perfectly valid case here.
And then our sort of bronze tier sort of option, which again is supported, you can do it, but we sort of don't recommend it for a variety of reasons, is in place. So an in-place upgrade is a destructive upgrade of v3. And by destructive there, what I mean is that it will basically force your v3 environment into a v4 environment. Anything that's incompatible with v4 will be lost. Now, you will never lose dashboards or perspectives in this migration. They are 100% compatible, so you'll get everything there. What you might lose is things like permissions, or you might lose navigation bar options and things like that. So we don't recommend it, but it does work. The only time this is really useful is if you're doing it in like a test environment where you've almost entirely not used the product, so there's no upgrade issues to migrate, or you've got a lot of web API providers. The reason I say that is because, as I mentioned before, IIS holds the encryption keys. If you do an in-place upgrade, we're using the same website and we're using the same app pool to do this, which means we are able to continue using the same encryption keys. So if you configured like 30 web API providers and it'd be a real pain to reconfigure all of those, you could do an in-place upgrade. But as I said, because this is a destructive upgrade, I would say you must not do an in-place upgrade unless you've run the upgrade assessment, you have got 0 issues, so that you know that actually you're not going to lose anything when you go ahead and do this. And you have high confidence that all of your users are happy and there aren't any gaps. Because once you've done this, you can't back it down to v3 anymore. So it's a one-way operation. So that's why I say definitely make sure that this is sort of like you're doing this with your eyes open and there's a specific reason for why you're choosing in place. Otherwise, choose side by side, happy days. Okay, there's a link on the bottom of the screen there to our deployment guide. We'll talk you through these 3 options and the various different sort of other caveats or things around that. Okay, so I mentioned the upgrade assessment tool. What's that? So we have added in our tool chain basically a new XE, upgrade.xc, that provides upgrade planning and migration services. When you install Squared Up, you have that sort of pre-packaged stage where it lays out a bunch of tools and then it runs a second installer to actually deploy an instance of Squared Up. So imaging tools effectively, a bit like the SQL Server installer. We have the same thing and there's a tool in there. It's bundled with those tools, but it's also available as a standalone download from our website. So if I go to squaredup.com and I go to the browser. Here we go. If I go to the download page, so download.squaredup.com, there is the v4 upgrade tool. It is just a zip file with an XE inside, and you can run this. The tool is completely standalone from Squared Up v3. It makes no changes to the environment, and it will give you quite a few cool things. The first thing it will give you is a report on your issues and your readiness to upgrade. So it will tell you, okay, these are features that have been superseded. These are things that you can't do anymore. This is why I'm sort of making these sort of changes. So that lets you immediately get ahead of what's going on. If you're doing an in-place upgrade, you'll really know now what you have to tackle before you can do that. And basically let you answer the question, like, should I try and move now? Or have I just got too much on my plate? Maybe we'll hold off and we'll migrate sort of in 2-3 months' time or in the new year or something like that. The second thing it will do is it will give you a sample navigation bar layout after you've upgraded. So give you an idea of, again, of what your nav bar will look like. So if you look at that and go, oh God, there's so many changes here, it's going to take me a while to kind of rationalize this. You can now start booking meetings with those teams to sort out their areas of the nav bar or work out how much sort of user migration or training you might have to do for that. So again, that's sort of an effort thing there. And it also gives you an inventory of your team folders. So what it will do, the upgrade process migrates profiles into team folders. So this will give you a snapshot of what your team folders will look like. So you can kind of get a sense of, after the migration's happened, these users will see these pieces of content, because v4 now has the idea of dashboard level RBAC, whereas v3 didn't. So we'll talk about that more in the team folders training webinar, but essentially now you can actually control visibility on a dashboard as well as using SCOM RBAC to control what objects are visible on that dashboard. Now, so it doesn't modify v3 in any way, and because it gives you a pretty good estimate of what's work that's involved in Squared Up v4, I would recommend you do this before you download anything else. Before you get the v4 installer or anything else, just do this, even if it's today, to get an idea of what's in your environment so you can get a good work assessment. So
it's probably worth mentioning as well that it's not a licensed product, so you can run this you can run it now. You don't have to worry about having an evaluation license or a test license or upgrading anything. Just run the tool, see what happens, and take it from there.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's actually run it now, and I'll show you a demo. Now, you can actually do this via PowerShell remoting if you really want to, but I'm not going to be that fancy today. So I've downloaded the tool. It's just an XE after all. Whacked it in C:/tools on my Squared Up server. And you run upgrade.exe, tell it to your generate a report, and the target, so --target, is then your v3 install path. So for most of you, this will be C:\init pub Squared Up v3. If you've modified that path, obviously change where it's installed. I've got mine in a very non-standard location, so that's why I've got a nice different path. Enter, assuming I'm actually in the session. There we go. and it'll now start wearing away and generate a plan for us. So basically what it's doing is analyzing our V3 environment and working out what it will look like. So it's going to give you a couple of things here. The first thing it's going to give you is blocking and non-blocking issues. Now, blocking issues means you can't upgrade. If you have any of those, the V4 installer will physically not allow you to upgrade unless you push like a big I want to upgrade anyway button, and even then it might actually stop and say it's not able to complete. So blocking issues you must resolve before you can upgrade. Non-blocking issues won't prevent you from doing an upgrade, but may see a loss of settings or incompatibility in some kind. That means that V4 isn't quite the same as V3. So some of these are ones that you can easily resolve or ignore in the case they're not relevant to you. Other ones that are there because you have to make some decision point that we can't do automatically. We do a lot of work for you in the upgrade tool, but some things just require you to make a business-driven decision, per se, which means that we can't make that for you. So as an example, it's saying that some dashboards appear multiple times on navigation bars. And in V4, you can't have a dashboard appear twice on the nav bar. You can have two copies of a dashboard appear, but they are not the same dashboard. They're independent copies, like they would be if you copied a file and put it somewhere else in the folder structure. So it's telling you that you've got those there, for example. Or it's telling you that there's some permissions here that can't be migrated cleanly across because profiles and team folders don't have the same sort of permission sets. So you can go through this and look at some of these and go, these aren't relevant. We're going to come back to this later on, and I'll walk you through some of the common resolutions for these things. I don't need to focus on it too much right now, but it is worth looking at that and going through.
Are there any examples of blocking issues you can think of?
They're mostly things that might arise because you've been fiddling dashboard JSON or files on disk yourself. That render your squared up environment somehow impossible to be converted into V4.
Okay.
A lot of the time, to be honest, they're bugs in the installer where because someone's made a change on disk, V3 kind of ignores it, but the upgrade tool wasn't written to take that into account, so it crashes that way. So those of you who've been providing support issues for us on upgrades, thank you very much for doing that. We hope to have resolved them all with the 403 upgrade, which came out on Monday, I believe. So if you've run the tool previously and it didn't work, try running it again now with a fresh download and you should be good to go. Okay, the second thing it will do is it will give you a listing or a sample navbar for what your system will look like after upgrade. Now, the thing to bear in mind is this looks rather empty for my environment. The reason is we've changed the dashboard pack schema slightly between V3 and V4. V3 dashboard packs are not compatible with V4. So the product is going to force you, as you're seeing this repeated message showing up here, to re-import community dashboard packs. We've converted all the V3 ones into V4 ones, but if you've imported ones from the dashboard pack site, you'll have to re-import those again after upgrade. So that's why the nav bar is looking quite sparse, is because all the unmodified ones that you haven't changed, we haven't brought into the sample nav bar. So you can see here, for example, basically what it's showing us, these are the dashboards that either you have created or the dashboards that you've modified from the existing packs. And if you've modified one, we will bring your modifications across. That's why they're showing up here. Like you can see the Windows Server 2016 dashboard's been modified, but the rest haven't. That's why it's been brought across. And it's put it under issues because there's a problem with this dashboard of some kind. So rather than being able to locate it on the navbar properly, we moved it to this issues folder for you to manually sort out. What you're also seeing here is our sample team folder layout. We've analyzed all the profiles in the system, and then based on the permissions and the dashboards that are in there, we've moved these into various different team folders, and then when those users log in, they'll see those dashboards appearing on their navigation bar. This isn't a one-to-one process. So for example, there's a SQL profile in V3 that has two folders under its top level. One's called SQL Legacy, one's called SQL 2016. You can't actually have two folders from the same team folder appear on the navbar in V4. There has to be like a root folder, which is that team sort of point where it goes on the navbar, as it were, and then you browse to it, everything underneath there. So what we've done is we've actually split it out into two different team folders. And if you look, the SQL admins are members of both of those two different ones, and they're called SQL 2016 and SQL Legacy, which are the name of the two top-level folders. So from a user perspective, they'll log in and they'll get exactly the same experience. But as an admin, you've actually got two team folders where previously you had one profile. So that gives you, again, a breakdown of what's going to happen and where stuff's going to get moved to and what's going to get brought across. So that is worth looking at to get an idea of what your environment will look like when you go ahead and do the migration. So definitely run this, definitely check it out. And because you can run this repeatedly, as many times as you like, our suggested workflow is to run this once, fix all the issues, run it again, fix the issues again, and basically check off all the items till you get down to the point where it's basically just complaining about things that you can't action for V3, like dashboard packs missing and you have to re-import it after installation, things like that. And eventually that makes your upgrade process much easier, because when you come to run the upgrade, it'll either say there's no issues in the UI or you can confirm it's just a couple of things that are going to make the upgrade process quite easy for you to do.
Just to make a quick shout out to our wonderful web team as well for their new community dashboard site, which obviously you'll get to check out as a result of this. So you can check that out in advance as well, dashboards.squaredup.com.
So that's the tool. Hopefully I'll give you some incentive to go and run it today. I definitely recommend you do that. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And as I said, give you a sort of incentive or give you an estimate of how long it's going to take to upgrade. Right, so that's the tool. Our suggested upgrade workflow, regardless of whether you're doing in-place or side-by-side, kind of looks like this. And I think for most of you this is going to be fairly obvious because you're all IT pros, you know what you're doing in this sort of area. First things first, get it onto a supported version. So at least 3.3.5, if not 3.4.6. Run the upgrade assessment tool, fix any issues, and sort of loop that step over and over again, running the tool, fixing any issues until you're happy. Then prepare to mitigate any remaining issues. So in the case of the OMS to log analytics conversion, you're going to have to skill up on the new query language. In the case of web API providers, track down people who have the passwords for that if it's not you, and get that information ready. Then we recommend that you perform the upgrade using an eval license. So we reset the trial, so anyone can go to request the trial page on our website, whack your details, get a free trial there. Do the initial sort of upgrade planning from that, because then if it goes horribly wrong or it stalls or whatever else, you haven't yet enabled your sort of V4 production license. So you can still fully support it on V3 for as long as you like. So at this point you can back out, and because that trial has a couple of activations on it, you could do it once. Oh, this thing's failed horribly. Fine, throw it away, fix some issues, do it again, sort of massage it a few times. So that's sort of the recommended workflow we suggest going through there. Once you've got the upgrade actually finished, import missing community packs, adjust the team folders or the nav bar or permissions, fix up those sort of bits and pieces that you either didn't or couldn't do prior to your upgrade after running the assessment tool. And then sort of the fun part, perform some UAT testing. So at this point, you need to get some stakeholders onto V4 to verify there aren't any gaps, or that there's nothing that there's like insurmountable training sort of workflow you have to go through. Now, one note to you at this point, because our side-by-side upgrade does just take a snapshot of dashboards, don't let this user acceptance testing drag on for too long. Because if you put like half your users on V4 for 3 months or something, or for like a couple of weeks, if the guys who are still using V3 are creating new dashboards and making changes in this time, you're going to be responsible for manually bringing those changes across into V4. So I would highly recommend that the people you leave on V4 during this period should probably be users who can't make any changes themselves, and that you warn the SquareUp admin team to be very cautious about the things that they actually change in the V3 environment, so that you can keep track of that sort of stuff. Anyway, do your user acceptance testing, and then finally, you can use that license portal to upgrade your license. If you haven't seen this yet, via sort of our various different emails, you can go to v4switchover.squaredup.com. Here, you can put in your email address, your management group name, and your V3 license key, your primary license key for V3. And what this will do is upgrade your license to V4. This enables you to activate your V4 upgraded instance, and it will also let us know that you are now taking support for V4 and that you're in your 3-month grace period. So that is an important thing to bear in mind. Do not do this with your trial key, and don't go and do this either with your test key or until you're ready to actually move ahead with the upgrade. You have got 3 months of side-by-side support, which is a long time. So, you could do this like a week before you're planning on doing your upgrade if you really want to, if you know it's going to go smoothly. But don't just do this now if you know full well you're not touching V4 for 6 months because you're going to do a SCOM 2019 migration and rebuild it all anyway.
Yeah, this is definitely sort of like right towards the end of the process. We're getting quite a lot of questions around license upgrades through support. So again, it's worthwhile just sort of calling out that this should be the sort of, I'm ready to go live with V4. Everything's already done and fixed, and I've used an eval key. I've got my perfect build. Everybody loves it, and we're ready to go. This is that final sort of switch over step.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. And then the final thing you have to do, which is the easy part, is begin the switch over and go live. And then, everything's amazing. Now, a couple of recommendations here from us. Obviously, you might need to repoint some URLs, so use a load balancer or a redirect rule or something. If you've had users going to like monitoring.contoso.com, you might want to move that URL over to the V4 one. We recommend that you stop the app pool or somehow lock down V3 so people can't make changes to it. So though we give you side-by-side, again, you don't want to be syncing content over. So if you just stop the V3 app pool, then you have your V3 environment pristine, left alone. you know that in that 90 days, if you've got some big issue where, oh crap, we just need to roll back and go back to v3, you can do so, and it should be pretty easy to do that. You could also remove everyone's permissions. That would also work fine if you wanted to keep the thing running in that time, but just inaccessible. Just go to the profiles and take everyone's dashboard creation rights away. That would also work pretty well. But there, go sort of live. But at that point, you've got 90 days now to use v4, love it, and sort of certify that you don't need v3 anymore. Okay, so that's our sort of workflow. So what I'm going to do now is quickly take you through a side-by-side upgrade just to see what it actually looks like. So I jump back to my server. I've already downloaded and run the tools, but I'll just do it again quickly now. If we go onto my folder, here's my squared up installer. I'm just going to run this. Obviously, you don't have to do this multiple times. Like if you're doing multiple upgrades, you can just go start, deploy squared up, and you'll have that available on your menu. Here we go. But just for completeness, I'm going to do this on the recording now. So yes, I want to run. Next, accept, install. So it's going to go install all the v4 bits. So you'll now have under program files, you'll have squared up v3 and squared up v4. They are individual items. So once you've when you're decommissioning v3, you can go to uninstall, add remove programs and uninstall the v3 version that way. And then in a moment, when it feels like it, it should pop up the new little wizard and let me go through deployment. There we go, underneath. I'm aware of that happening. So one thing to bear in mind, if you have multiple v3 instances on the same box, or you've already deployed like a v3 like clean installation when you're just playing around, a new installation, the installer defaults to behaving as if you're doing a in-place upgrade of an existing v4 version, like going from 402 to 403. So what I recommend you do is just check that to make sure it's the right thing. And if, like me, you've got lots of different versions on here, flip it to the option you actually want. So here I can choose side-by-side, in place, or brand new installation. I am side-by-side upgrading, and I don't want to upgrade that version. I want to upgrade my upgrade v3 instance I created here. Okay, hit OK. So that is now the right version, the right instance, and it will start building that report. This is exactly the same report you saw in the assessment tool. It uses the same thing. So if I haven't seen those issues previously, I can click on this button to then go through these and verify that they're what I'm expecting to see, or back out the upgrade at this point, because some of these messages look scary or will cause problems for me. Okay, I hit next. It's then going to ask me where I want to put the thing. I'm just going to edit that and change the application name to squared up v4. That'll be the default. It's just that in this case here, it's choosing that name because, again, I have multiple squared up v3 and v4 instances already installed. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. This is upgrade v4. Sorry, I have a lot of names here already in use. That's why it's done that. Hit OK. Okay, and I should now be good to go. So I hit next, deploy, and it'll start deploying. If you're running in HA, as I mentioned, it will use this step to automatically pull your HA config and then apply that. So if you're running in HA and you do this upgrade side by side in your primary, you will now have a HA configured v4 instance. And you don't have to go and run the HA steps manually yourself. So there is no extra work to do if you're running HA, which I thought I'd just call out. Call out there. So now it's going to do the deployment and copy the files. This will go so quick, so I'm always mystified how it manages to take so long on our webinars. Here we go. I know we're running over time slightly, guys, so apologies for that. Okay, there we go. I will hit finish and background. Okay, so while Adam is going to helpfully now, while I talk to you a bit, go and just whack an activation key in there and push the buttons through the deployment wizard to make it finish. But you know what that looks like. You put in your credentials and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk about some of the common issues. So there are, most of our upgrade issues are actually fairly straightforward to resolve, but some of them may require some discussion with our teams. So I wanted to call out a couple of things here just for sort of non-obvious steps that may be required. So OMS tiles have to be recreated as log analytics tiles. So what happens during the upgrade, and I'll show you this in a minute once Adam's got the instance online. What happens here is that when you migrate, OMS tiles don't exist in v4. So we replace them with a text tile that lists all the options of how v3 was configured. So if you didn't go to 3.4 and swap them over before the upgrade, you've now got all the information you need to do that manual upgrade yourself. So you can take the query, try and convert that into a log analytics query yourself, and then actually put that in place. And bearing in mind, the two languages have different features and things available. So the queries aren't just copy and paste. It won't always work. So do keep that in mind. The onus is on you there to upgrade that query. In the case of Web API providers being lost, that's an easy one. All you have to do is re-enter the credentials. When you go to the tiles, which I'll show you in a second, they'll all complain in v4 that here we go. So if I just get rid of this, because Adam's done it for me, they'll all complain that the provider's missing and they got the name in it. So you just recreate the provider with that same name. And again, if you've gone side by side, you will be able to see what the provider usually displays and work out, oh, actually that's a log analytics provider pointing at this workspace. So now it's easy for me to go ahead and recreate that. So here comes v4. So one thing to note about the nav bar is it looks a bit funky. So what's happened here is all of your migrated dashboards have appeared first, and then it's brought across the standard ones that you'd see in v4 when you click the import button on the end, which is why you have the overview, knock, applications, and teams ones. And here's all the dashboards that we've imported as v4 versions. So immediately, a thing to note is that you will have all the ones that you brought across. Like, for example, if I go to Infrastructure, Windows, Server Updates, here is some log analytics tiles that I created. They're using Web API, and it's saying that it couldn't find that provider. So all I have to do is go and recreate that. So that's under the infrastructure folder. Normally, this is where you'd find all of the server version dashboards, but they're over here under our Teams folder instead when they got re-imported. So here, your simple step is to look through these dashboards and decide what you want and move them across under the navbar layout that makes sense to you under v4 the most. Likewise, here's the SQL 2016 dashboards that you modified. They are different to the ones that are available and shipped from our packs, which is why you have both. And it's up to you to look at the two and say, okay, well, actually, what is the difference here? So, for example, if I go to the this is the Windows Server 2016 dashboard that came across from v3, so it looks okay. If I go and look at the one that came with our v4 installation, looks a bit nicer. I'll probably here keep the v4 one, but if I went to the SQL ones, you'd see that they're basically exactly the same. So I'd probably then keep my modified versions and delete the new ones that come with that by just going and deleting the folder with the dashboards. Anyway, providers, that's what I was talking about. So I go to System, and I go to Web API. All I have to do is click Add New Provider, Log Analytics, and as long as I give it the same name, and here I'm going to cheat and use my handy dandy, the classic demo inception here of having too many windows open. Notepad file with the details in. As long as I create it with exactly the same name and the same details, then it will just start working when I go back to it. Basically, I went and got the access key. For Log Analytics, you can't actually get that back and make it plain text, but you can just request a new one. So just request a new key from the Azure portal and put that new one in. So that's that one. Let me show you the OMS tile one. Here's an example of the OMS tile output. So as you can see, it says unsupported tile was in place here. The upgrade report does include every instance of a tile it's done this to. So you can look in that and see where it's going to happen. And it's giving me the legacy query that was being run. If you had like certain columns configured or limits on rows or other display options configured, those are listed here. The only thing you have to look up is the scope. Because the upgrade happens outside of SCOM, we can't look up the IDs that we have in Squared Up and actually associate those with the friendly names of items. So what we'd recommend here is you've got a group with an ID, just open up PowerShell, get -scom group, -ID, that ID, there you go, give you the name. Or if it was a class, same thing, get -scom class, put the ID in and give you that. So you can usually work that out pretty easily. Obviously, it's on a perspective. It's fairly obvious what the scope will be because it will tell you the scope was this object. So now you know what it's pointing at. So that should give you all the information you need. If that's still not enough, what you can do, a pro tip, you can go into the JSON for this tile. And there you go. It actually got in it all the original configuration options. So if you have done something really cool or clever with your OMS tile, but with a custom label or something like that, it's all actually in here and visible. So you haven't actually lost it. You just can't render it as a OMS tile anymore because OMS is gone in v4. Okay, the other one I want to talk about was permissions. So if I flip back to my upgrade report, one of the things it will complain about in here is permissions. So a couple of notes. It's saying here that profile int OPP admins grants the following permissions which cannot be migrated as they're no longer delegated. And it lists a whole bunch of stuff. Basically what it's saying here is that in v4, only Squared Up admins, SCOM admins, can do these things. And I had a profile before, which was all the SCOM admins that I just enabled all those features for too. So because they get everything by default, I can actually delete that profile because it's not doing anything in my v3 environment. And it's just giving me this sort of false noise here in v4. Likewise, it's also saying that for a particular group here, the web team are not assigned an author role in their team folder because it was missing the following permissions: publish, delete, and unpublish. So in a team folder, if you want to be able to edit, if you're an author, we give you a whole set of permissions, and we didn't want to automatically escalate users. So now you have to decide, okay, if I don't want those users to have the ability to do those things, actually they can't create anything at all, and they have to be view only in team folders. But again, that's for sort of team folders in the future. So those are sort of the conversations you might see with permissions, and the fix there is basically in v4. If you decide, yep, that's cool, actually I don't mind saying that they are able to modify the navbar area and publish things because of the way team folder scoping works. All you have to do is come in here to team folders, find the team folder in question. So web team, click on them. And then in here, I can edit them and give them back permissions. So look, right now they've got view. I can just click the gear here and modify them up manually to author. So that's a pretty easy remediation. But again, it's one you have to decide, do I want to escalate permissions or do I want to actually say, sorry, you can't create things anymore quite the way you used to be able to do that. So now we've got a different sort of process. The final one I want to call out is dashboards appearing multiple times on the navigation bar. So as I mentioned in v4, every dashboard can only appear on the nav bar once, and it must appear on the navigation bar. So in v3, you had a thing you could do where you could publish a dashboard but not put it on the nav bar anywhere, which meant A, you had this huge more menu, and B, users could still get to those dashboards even though they weren't on the nav bar. They could just search for them, but that often led to confusion because, like, where's this dashboard coming from, or who's actually using it or responsible for it? So we've kind of gotten rid of that concept in v4. They all have to go on the nav bar. So you'll get this folder called issues, and under here we'll place dashboards that have come from multiple different places or weren't on the nav bar at all, and you can work that out. If you're a user who had the more menu enabled, we've kind of cheated here. What we've done is we'll create, for the dashboards that weren't on the nav bar, we'll create a folder called more and put them all in there. So for your normal users, it functions as if you had a more menu, but it is not the more menu. It won't automatically add new dashboards to it. Whenever you create a dashboard in v4, it will ask you where on the navbar that dashboard is going. So you'll be forced to actually specify somewhere for it to go. Now, there's a couple of different bits here. Obviously, we can't automatically remediate this because we don't know which single instance should actually be the one that's real. If you look at your upgrade assessment or the one inside the UI, it will tell you every instance of where that dashboard used to be. So for example, the Server 2016 one appeared on two different profiles, the default everyone one and under OPP Web Admins, under two different locations. So I've got a couple of options here. I could clone that dashboard in v4 or in v3 and make it so that they've got those two different users have different dashboards entirely. They look the same, but they are actually different dashboards. Or I could relocate things and say, well, actually, look, SCOM RBAC's in place. When someone goes to the Windows Server 2016 dashboard, the web admins only see web servers anyway. So why don't I, rather than having like a web servers, just have like a Windows servers top level item that everyone can see, or at least people who own Windows servers can see. Because I can add now to a team folder more than one user entity or more than one group, and then let SCOM RBAC take care of what's actually appearing on there. So you can kind of move to a shared model, or you can say, look, you guys can now own the whole web team dropdown anyway. You can create dashboards, but only in that area. So actually, I'll clone you a copy, and then you can finally make changes to it, right? So if they've been crying out for ages to say, oh, this doesn't show me the things I care about, they can now say, oh, I'll just delete it, or I'll make the change I want to turn it into an IIS servers dashboard. So kind of like, rather than you owning it, make them own updating and working on that particular dashboard.
It was something that was requested very frequently, sort of over the lifespan of v3, was SCOM admin saying, I don't want to be in charge of everyone's content, and I'm sort of forced into it because dashboards appear all over the place. And then the other side is, like you said, users wanting a bit more control over their dashboards. But it is very important to sort of differentiate that in v3 it was effectively the same dashboard. Mm-hmm. Anyone making a change, regardless of where it appeared on the nav bar, everyone would see it. In v4 now, they are, if you do have it in multiple places, they are separate files. You can modify one without the other, but equally you have to take that into account. Mm-hmm. If you want to change them all, you are now changing multiple things.
Yeah, I guess decide what you value more there, like a single authoritative truth dashboard, or do you value customizability? And then choose appropriately. And so that's probably, I think that really, to me, that's the biggest thing you'll have to do probably with an upgrade, is sort out those conflicts where, for whatever reason, we can't decide where it goes in the nav bar, and then you're going to go and clean those up. So that's probably your biggest item as a squared up admin. And again, that's something that you probably as a Scrum admin might not be able to solve by yourself. You might have to talk to people. So again, get ahead of this right now. Get those teams in front of you and sort of as a group decide, right, what are we doing for our monitoring? What does the navbar strategy look like? Do we need to devolve control? Do we need to break down silos? Whatever. That's sort of an exercise that we leave up to you.
And just to quickly note as well, because we've talked about team folders quite a lot without really going into much detail, because we are saving that for a future episode. Not everything has to be a team folder. So you can still have a folder that appears for everyone that can contain all your shared stuff. Doesn't have to have permissions, anything like that. But if it doesn't have permissions, it's sort of, a bit more of a question around who's sort of the owner of that content.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so that's sort of the common upgrade issues and some of their sort of mitigations. So let's move this towards sort of the ends. So hopefully that's giving you an idea of what's actually involved in the whole of the upgrade process. There is a long and lengthy doc on our site. I thoroughly recommend, I could not recommend more, that you read this article.
Is that because you wrote it, Matthew?
I may be one of the contributing authors. But like it does walk you through the whole thing end to end, all the processes, all the gaps, all the sort of bits and pieces that are missing, and it's well worth going through this to understand really what's going on. If you don't read that, at least please run the assessment. Adam sort of noted before we start the webinar that some customers have chosen the fourth installation scenario, which is just close your eyes, hit next a lot, and see what happens.
Yeah.
We don't recommend you do that.
I mean, we like people being keen, but still read the instructions.
Yeah, it's kind of it will help you out a lot, guys, if you do it. So definitely recommend you check that out. And it's got the links in this one article has links to like the download tool, has the portal, has everything else you need. So it's definitely worth getting as a single resource. Right, so thank you very much for staying on. We went over, and I'm really sorry about that. If you have any questions that we haven't answered so far in the chat, feel free to log those now, and we will get you answers immediately live. If not, if you're on YouTube, obviously feel free to put questions down in the chat or reach out to our support, and we will do our best to assist you. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you in the next training session.